Thank you, Mike, for accepting this invitation. And I would like to start, like, I was checking, you study math and everything, but I'm more interested to your beginnings, how you decided to go to math, or are you always passionate about math? And then we can go through this all the journey.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's an easy answer. I mean, I had a natural talent for mathematics,
Mm.
and that I didn't really demonstrate until I was in my later teens. So I was just finishing high school when a light bulb went on, and suddenly mathematics were completely trivial to me. And so my senior years in high school, I had really high math marks, and I found it super easy. And my math teacher at the time encouraged me to take mathematics post-secondary and computer science. So it was like, hey, I'll do anything that's easy. So that's what I did. I went to the University of Waterloo and took honors mathematics and computer science.
Yeah. And then when your entrepreneur career started?
I always had sort of an entrepreneurial interest, which drove my wife a bit crazy much of the time. I worked I worked the private sector for about 8 years, and then I worked in the public sector for another 10 years. And after that, I just had the itch to go out on my own. And I guess 1999, I quit my job and started a firm.
And always you was kind of drawn to the mining safety, or was
No, my draw has always been in innovation. So my first company was an innovation company that focused on the transformation of healthcare and policing, and I did that for 11 years. And really, what I found the most enjoyable and that I was most passionate about was really taking the as is and building the future from that. And the more disruptive, the more enjoyment I got out of it.
And when you start with those drums or all that innovation of about safety and the mining?
Well, I retired from my private sector company I sold in 2010, and I retired because all that disruption wore me out. And I took about 5 years off. And when I came back into the private sector, I came as a venture capitalist and an entrepreneurial coach. So I spent a couple of years just helping other people realize their entrepreneurial dreams. And that's when I came across a group of guys that were interested in really helping in the mining transformation, which is really just started over the last 3 years in a real intense way. I mean, mining was always trying to transform itself, but let's be honest, it's probably about 10 years behind the transformation that's occurred in the public sector, like e-government, and in the healthcare sector, like e-health, and a lot of the technology that's sort of been brought onto the scene to really transform the way we get healthcare.
And in your point of view, what do you think why them were like a little forgotten down there?
Yeah, I think that it was the right conditions had not occurred in the mining sector to create the burning platform that would cause them to really take dramatic transformation seriously. So if you kind of, and I'm not a mining guy, I've learned most of what you're hearing over the last, well, like what I'm saying over the last 4 years or so, but it's experience that's gained from really being underground and in the trenches and in the boardrooms. So I've worked. The way I tend to innovate is go to the lowest level of application, so the actual worker. So I spent about a year underground with miners doing surveying and other tasks, and then moved into the boardroom for another year, understanding executive needs, and then really tried to translate that into transformational solutions. But if you look at what the conditions were, it's only recently that the need to go much deeper underground than has ever been excavated before, and the increasing costs of that depth meant that if you didn't apply technology, you could not be profitable to the degree that was required, because the price of a precious metal is driven by the market. It has a ceiling. There's nothing you can do about that. So the best way to make profit is to reduce the cost of recovering that mineral. And things like the human resource, air and water, and those services underground, they're very costly. And if you can reduce those costs, you can dramatically change your profitability per ton. And so I think those factors and the need to go deeper and deeper have really driven executives to say, well, how do we reduce costs? If you can reduce people, you immediately reduce costs. If you can reduce diesel transmission by going to electric vehicles, you dramatically reduce the need for airflow. And if you reduce that, you dramatically reduce your power requirements, which can create multiple factors of cost reduction. So there are big projects in the sector right now around just reducing the crusher electrical requirements by 5%, and it saves companies millions and millions of dollars every year in electrical costs. So all of those conditions really created an ah shit moment, or as Oprah would say, an aha moment for a lot of executives to say, look, we really need to embrace technology in a completely different way, and really embrace aggressive or disruptive innovation. And so that's really, I think, what changed the conditions to make companies like ours and the work we're doing more valuable to the industry than it would have been considered 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
I had a podcast with human resources of one of they call it minor mining, gold mining. And she was telling me that the Department of Human Resources was gain a grant from government, like a $1 million and they are doing, they call it micro safety training. She was saying her mind and another mind get fusion together to kind of develop a small videos that they can just click the iPhone or the laptop. They can, before enter to the mine, kind of check, just to be more connected with the safety process. So they were kind of.
Yeah, I think that I watched that video that interview that you had done with
Amanda. With Amanda.
Yep. And I think that this is another example of technology being applied to innovate. And I've said to a lot of executives that I met with, don't expect to transform the work unless you transform the worker. So, you're moving people from a more traditional physical job to a new job that's very intellectual. And so there's different kinds of safety requirements when you do that. And there's different performance skills that are required when you do that. So I think that sometimes gets lost in the sexiness of the technology, whether you're talking about drones or autonomous vehicles. And we really need to keep focus on the real strategic value of HR strategies that would really transform workers so that they are ready to embrace the new transformations that are occurring. Nothing will kill technology faster than workers who don't want to work with it.
Exactly. And you think that in these kind of moments, we are more aware about the working in mining? Because for some reason, I feel like now we have it more present.
I think that's an interesting point, and I think that might be true. Now, from my perspective, prior to becoming involved with a mining company, mining was just the top. I knew it existed, but I had no depth of understanding or really connection to the broader supply chain. So, connecting the dots between a lot of the precious metals in our cell phones and our TVs and other technologies to the actual work that was happening underground, the sort of the down and dirty activities blowing things up and digging them out, I really didn't appreciate the critical role that mining plays in the supply chain of all of the nifty toys that we all use every day.
Interesting.
So I think that's I think more and more people are aware of that. And I think especially with the pandemic and the shortages that have occurred because of a reduction in manufacturing or production of those metals, people are really now, I think, more sensitized to the supply chains, whether it's toilet paper or your computer chips for technology you're trying to build.
So you always been in Norway, in that area?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Southern Ontario and moved to Northern Ontario when I was about 15. And I've always lived and worked here. I've always lived here, but I've worked abroad. Most of my career I spent in Toronto and then in South Africa and the UK and Seychelles and Mozambique towards the end of my career, helping them transform their technology, their infrastructure, bringing telehealth to remote villages in Madagascar, or helping the South African government restructure the way they did manage tax returns, things like that were very interesting, but a bit taxing when you live in Northern Ontario and you're going to work on Monday in Pretoria.
Yeah. So can you share something that you did outside of the country that you feel like, wow, I feel we made a difference? Like that way people kind of know more about you.
Well, I think I would have to say that the involvement that I had through the Commonwealth Secretariat in the UK it was sort of both inside and outside the country. So for about 5 years, I trained IT executives in Toronto. So the British government would bring over about 27 young executives from developing countries, Solomon Islands all the way to Seychelles, and they would spend 10 days with me. And I would essentially try and impart every bit of experience that I had in transforming governments from a digital perspective, everything from building e-government strategies to the actual project management of activating a broadband across an entire country. And I think that to me was very satisfying. And I felt that, I was planting a seed in all of these countries that they could then germinate and transform the I guess, well-being and access to services of their citizenship. Many of those executives would then call me over to their respective countries to help with specific projects. That's how I wound up in South Africa and Madagascar and Seychelles. And most of the time, it was really to lay the foundation or the infrastructure. Think of it, if technology was automobiles, laying a 6-lane highway is the first thing you want to do. Otherwise, you're going to have traffic jams all over the place. So in both of those countries, I went to help lay out the transformational infrastructure that would then allow them to do things like health support and everything from electronic driver license renewal, all the services that we in Canada here kind of now take for granted. And I think those are the things. That was towards the end of my career. I retired shortly after that, but I did 2 or 3 of those engagements in those countries that I felt really set them on a path. Again, they had to do all the hard work, but I think I shared some of the potholes that we ran into here in Canada when I did the same thing for the federal and provincial governments, or participated in that evolution. I used to tell these executives it's easy to walk on water if you know where the stones are. And so I would just try and impart them with a few, here's where you need to step, and then the hard part would be up to them. But I found that very satisfying, and it was a good way to sort of cap off my private sector career.
And right now, are you still working in your company, SafeSight?
Yeah, so my previous company was called Collective Minds, and I retired from that in 2010. And then sort of participated as a mentor for SafeSight, and then eventually folded into the CEO as the company grew and became more and more in need of executive support. I hope to one day retire again.
Seems like you start something, you kind of complete it, and then what is the next challenge? No, like.
Yeah, I think that's my problem in a nutshell. Yeah, I'm trying to learn how to find different ways to find challenges that don't require so much of my energy. But yeah, I think if you start something, you should finish something, and we're certainly growing, and I think making a difference in the sector, which is very satisfying. Especially when, what we're really focusing on is the safety transformation, taking people out of harm's way, or making it so that if there's a need to respond, it can be done faster and more effectively than it ever could be done before. So, maybe one day, there's been times where our equipment's been crushed under falling rock, which could have been a human being. So, we're saving lives to a certain degree, not as dramatic as it sounds, but I think it's a contribution that's worth
making. Any stories now that we are approaching to Halloween, creepy about in the mining or something?
Well, it's interesting too. I didn't have any trouble going underground, but I have been with folks that, when they go underground in that very dark, wet, contained environment, it causes a lot of anxiety, and they have to leave. But it is if you can just imagine sort of any environment that would creep you out, that's pretty much the underground. When you're right at the development area where there isn't a lot of light, they haven't brought the light and the services yet, and it's hot and it's dark and it's wet, and it's very uncomfortable. I really salute the folks that do that every day. I've been underground for 2 or 3 days at a time in various shifts, and I find it exhausting. I don't know how folks do that weeks on end. So I think we often don't appreciate what they're putting up with down there, so we can have the products and services we have on surface here.
Yeah, I think people are more now than ever looking for transparency in all the process in any business, because I think so when people is appreciating the job that they do, they at least know, at least I'm doing it for that, and they know that I'm doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I find it that companies and everybody's coming like, and I am in that side, like why you have to hide all the process and all the stuff that you have to do, because that's the important part. It's not like, okay, sure, milk appear in the supermarket. Yeah, but all the hands they have to pass to.
Yes. Yeah, and I think people are even scrutinizing exactly what is done to produce a product, whether that's what chemicals are used to put it to market. We're big label readers here. We read every label on every package. We try to eat very whole food, no processed. And I think people look at products now, and they look at what's in that product and what it does to the global environment and global warming, and they try and be more conscious of what they're endorsing with their money. And so people are more aware of how did this thing come to be, who touched it, and in doing that, did they help or hurt the planet?
Exactly.
So, and I think that mining has been very sensitive to environmental impacts and managing the environment. I think for long before I sort of got involved in the industry, and I think, but even now, people are questioning that even further to say, well, how exactly did you, over and above managing the outer ecosystem that the mine exists in, what about the people and the tools and the chemicals you're using to actually excavate that mineral from underground? So I think there's a big awareness of that, and people are trying to vote with their money on what should continue and what should not continue.
Yeah, I have a podcast in Mexico, and these people, the CEO was the organization that they have is like how the companies impact the social. So, and what's interesting, because he said, I'm working with two mines in Toronto, that they are very, very hard working in how my job is gonna impact in 5-10 years, and working through the families that they are working in that area. Like if I'm a company that I'm gonna be taking care in 5 years, if I'm not here, how the people is still be with that support. So it's like
Yeah, I think there's our consciousness as workers and as consumers is changing. And, with the latest impacts we've had with changing weather patterns, and I think just sensitizes to that even more. So I think it's great. Not something that my generation did as a baby boomer, but this next generation is very conscious, and it's going to force us to make the needed changes, I think, both for our families and for the planet as a whole. So good to see.
It's very good. So something else that you want to add, or want to touch?
No, I think that if I get the theme or the intent of your podcast is really to help people understand the career paths they can follow, or how people got to where they are. And I really think that my message is, if you follow your passion and let it lead you to your career, I think you will the rest will come. The riches, the satisfaction, etc. They will follow you, as opposed to taking a job just for the money or the vacation or whatever other thing you might find as an attraction. I think that I've always had a philosophy of build meaning, not money. If you build meaning in the world, the money will follow. So I think it's important for people to recognize that. This was not my career path. I graduated from university and thought I'm going to be a programmer and I'm going to retire as a programmer. And that's where my career started. But as I followed what I felt passionate about, I wound up where I am today. And I think that because of that, I'm able to do what I want with who I want, when I want, and do something that I'm good at and I get enjoyment from. So I would encourage people to sort of listen to their heart a little bit, and then make, you got to make wise career moves. I know when I left my job, I had a job with the provincial government, which, in Northern Ontario is not something you walk away from. And when I left it, a lot of people thought I'd lost my mind.
Yeah.
But again, I was following what I felt passionate about. And that really, I can say was the best move I ever made, even though at the time it was a leap of faith. And I think that's what you have to do sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, amazing, Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.